Hello to you, friends. This is Dhamma on Air number 25, recorded on the 17th of June, 2016. There are 6 questions. Most of them spins around the undeclared questions, 10 undeclared questions to the Buddha, and some other issues about stream entry and how to train meditation, how to find a suitable meditation object to one's temperament. But first, the normal intro. Namo Tasso Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Worthy, honorable, and perfectly self-enlightened was the blessed Buddha. The first question, question 52, goes like this. What is and why did the Buddha refuse to answer the 14 unanswered questions? What is and why did the Buddha refuse to answer these 14 questions? They are actually only 10. It's the same questions in Mahayana, a little bit advanced with 2 or confused with 2 more possibilities. But this, classically, is only 10 questions. They go like this. The 10 indeterminable questions, since they cannot be determined, they are, of course, unanswerable, avyaakata, indeterminable. You cannot determine whether it's this or whether it's otherwise, and therefore they cannot be answered. It goes like this. The universe is eternal. Is the universe eternal? Is the universe not eternal? Is the universe finite? Is the universe infinite? Does the Buddha exist after death? Does the Buddha not exist after death? Does the Buddha both exist and not exist after death? After death, does the Buddha neither exist nor not exist? Is the body and the self or the soul, the jiva, is this the same? Or is the body and the soul something different? These are the 10 questions. We'll go through them in detail. But first, in general, one can say a good philosopher, he will go around and say there's 2 classifications of questions. There are questions that can be answered, and then there are questions that cannot be answered. And if the philosopher, he goes around it like a fire and looks at it from all sides, or like a house, looks at it from all sides and see, this question cannot be answered, then he doesn't try to answer it. And it's the same with the Buddha here. These questions cannot be answered because they are wrongly posed. And I will give some other examples from modern philosophy where the same goes. There's 2 classic questions that cannot be answered. One is, for example, he lies. You have to, does he lie? Does he speak false? Let's say you have to determine whether this is true or false. The statement that he lies. If he lies, we say that this statement is true. But then it cannot be true because he lies. It's true that he lies, but then the statement cannot be true. Or if you say, for example, I lie, is this statement true or not? Is it true or false? If we say I lie, the statement I lie is true. That is the truth when I say is I lie. Then we come into a logical contradiction because I lie. It's true that I lie. But how can it be true when I lie? Similarly, if we say the statement I lie is false, this is to say I lie is false and I speak the truth. But how can it then be false? So there you can see a contradiction, a logical breakdown from this simple example, I lie. It's from classical, modern, contemporary philosophy. So you see, this question, is it true or false when I say I lie? It cannot be determined, because however you determine it to be, then it contradicts the question itself, the statement itself. So it's a small paradox in language that goes around, it bites itself in the tail and cannot be answered. Another question that Bertrand Russell, very neat philosopher and mathematician of English origin, he posed to his students to make them clear about that you can easily formulate questions in conventional language that seemingly makes sense, but the question doesn't apply anyway. It's senseless, it's without meaning to ask this kind of question. And so he asked his students to just answer this question. Is the French king bald? And then they immediately start to think, and when you pose this question also, if you pose it to yourself, you instantly you say it has something to do with hair or not. But actually then you try to find out, okay, next one, who's the French king? But there's no French king. There's no French king. If there's no French king, then how can this non-existent entity of a French king ever be bald, long-haired, afro-haired, blue-haired, yellow-haired? He cannot have any attribute whatsoever because he doesn't exist. And thereby the meaning of the question falls down. It falls flat because there is no French king. So he cannot be neither bald nor long-haired nor anything else. He cannot be anything whatsoever. So therefore, to determine whether he's this or that is a senseless question. It doesn't apply, simply. It doesn't apply. So the question itself is wrongly posed. It contains some assumptions of some existence, in this case the non-existent French king, that he actually exists. And therefore, when he exists, then it can be determined whether he has hair or whether he is bald. But since he does not exist, since there is no French king, then it cannot be determined. And the question falls out and becomes meaningless, because it asks something about that presumes that there is an existent French king. And the same goes with these 10 questions. I'll go into detail. It's not the case that the Buddha didn't answer. The Buddha said there's 4 ways to answer questions. Either categorically, yes, no, this, that, or analytically, you split it up in questions in many things and explain each part for itself. Or with a counter question, you ask another question to the one who asked the question to make him understand what's up in the air here. And then no answer. This is also a question. For example, no answer can be a very good, neat way. The hunter comes and asks the Buddhist, a deer come and run into the forest. The hunter comes with his gun ready and asks the Buddhist, did you see the deer? Then the Buddhist says, yes. Categorical answer. Did he went into the forest? The Buddhist doesn't say anything. Did you see where it went? Yes, the Buddhist say. Where did it go? The hunters ask. The Buddhists don't say anything. Why not? Because then he knows the hunter will go and kill the deer, and thereby cause the deer harm, and also cause himself karmically harm. So he doesn't say anything. He doesn't lie. He doesn't say, I didn't see it, or it went that way when it went this way. He just don't answer the question. And that's also an answer. In the following 3 speeches where the Buddha is asked these 10 questions by various people, was classical philosophical questions at the Buddha's time. Then he applies both categorical answers, in most cases no, as we will see. And he also answers this analytically, and he also gives no answer. So he tries all his way to come around these indeterminable questions. First, the universe is eternal, not eternal, finite or infinite. They are easy because this cannot be determined. You cannot see the beginning of a cycle of Big Bang, Big Crunch, Big Bounce cycles. the beginning of the eons, number of eons, you cannot determine. Even if you go and ask those highest devas who have a life length of 84,000 universal cycles, that is 84,000 times 100 billion years they live, they cannot answer it either. They cannot answer it either. Even if they ask their families, their grandpas and so on, did you see the beginning? Have you heard anybody who has seen the beginning? Then they also fall short. So from a principal point of view, the beginning of the universal cycle is not determinable, is not discernible, cannot be pointed out. And the same thing in spatial expansion. Whether universes or multiverses, the cosmos, the end of the cosmos cannot be determined whether it's finite or infinite. So it's not, these four questions are indeterminable. You cannot determine them. And since you cannot determine them, then one cannot answer the question. It's out of reach of the knowable. There's some, let's say this is reality, and then there's a part of that reality that can be known. And then there are some parts of reality that cannot be known. And this is obviously some part of reality that cannot be known, even by a Buddha who knows everything, who's omniscient. So these four questions are asked from the obvious reason they are indeterminable. They cannot be answered. It cannot be known. It's outside of what can be known and thereby answered. So this goes easy. So that we take the two next one, who was also a little bit more easy, not so difficult as the last four. But the two next goes is the body is the same as the soul, or the body is something different than the soul. This is to say, the soul in Pali is jiva. And it's not well defined, but from what you can see in other contexts where this word is jiva is used, then it can mean something both mind, can mean both mind, and it can also mean what is life, basically. So what's the difference between a dead body and a live body? There's something in the live body. In old days, we call it vitality, that's alive. From a doctor point of view, I would call it metabolism, that the burning of sugar and the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide with the surroundings is ongoing and is producing heat. But it's not exactly heat. It's not exactly metabolism. It's a difference between a live body and a dead body. You cannot say it's a soul either, because that is only something mental. So it straddles there in between. The Buddha say that this cannot be separated completely. They cannot be answered whether it is or not. It has correlates to two philosophical questions in modern philosophy. It's called the mind-brain problem, or the philosophy of mind. What we call qualia, for example, when you see the color blue, or taste sweet. How is that actually correlated to the neural activity in the brain? Because you cannot see any sweet or anything in the neural blips in the single neuron firings. So how is it connected to what the philosopher called qualia? And the answer to that is that we don't know. We don't know. Obviously, the mind has something to do with the brain. It's connected something to the activity in the brain, but it's not exclusively the activity in the brain. So whether you can separate these or not, that's the Buddha say, this cannot be answered. This cannot be answered. And thereby one should not try. One should not try. The other thing is that this is vitality questions. What is actually the difference between a live body and a dead body? What is that make the live body live? And what is the dead body dead? You cannot say it's only the heartbeat, because you can take the heart out and stop it and put it in a heart-lung machine or put it in an electrical pump. Then you have a perfectly live body. Same thing with breathing. You can make a respirator, or you can put it in a heart-lung machine. Then you have a live body still. So what actually is the difference between a live body and a dead body? It's not really clear. That they at Buddhist time call the jiva, together with what we today call mind or consciousness. So whether this is apart from the body is something else, then from a doctoral point of view, I would call it metabolism. That this is biochemical processes is ongoing in the cells, and the cells don't decay. They sustain themselves. They make ATP, and the ATP make the cell membrane pump, and it keeps the cell alive. But how actually this cycle, this self-sustaining cycle of metabolism, how that goes down, is not an easy thing to point out, actually. What actually the cause of death is in the ultimate sense. Of course, if you have a heart attack or if you get knocked down by a train or so on, is obvious. But in most other cases where this is not the case, then the difference between a live body and a dead body is not really obvious, because it's the same molecule, it's the same atoms, exactly the same atoms, exactly the same molecules, exactly the same water, exactly the same blood sugar that is in the dead body as in the live body. So from a physical, biochemical point of view, then the dead body and the live body is identical. But the live body has life. The dead body has not. Why is it so? And this we don't know. The Buddhists just say that these two cannot be separated. And one should not try, one becomes confused. It ends up in same thing with if you say the jiva, the soul, is something mentally, then you end up in the classical mind-brain conundrum of modern philosophy, which is also so far an unresolvable problem. One interesting note is that, for example, when you meditate, then if you get the fourth dhyana, the fourth absorption, then you stop breathing. There's still metabolism, there's still heat in the body. There's still a heartbeat, it's very slow, probably around 5 to 10 beats per minute. Both the prefrontal cortex are probably shut down. We don't know because scanning has not yet been performed on people in absorption. But if you perform it on schizophrenia patients and some artists, when they musicians or painters, where they call it the flow, where they don't perceive time, they don't perceive themselves, but they are exceedingly accurate in their movements and in their doing their art and in doing their sport, then you see that they do it without the prefrontal cortex, where are the higher functions. The rest is motoric or sensoric of the brain. But what is in front of the brain, in both lobi, in both hemispheres, is the prefrontal cortex. It's where the personality sits and the sensation of time, the sensation of self. And if you shut that down, you should think, then you cannot do anything. But there actually the performance is maximal from these artists, and also in the case, it's called temporary hypofrontality in neurophysiology. It's an interesting phenomenon. But that points to that the mind has also aspect that is something else than activity in the brain. Because this person is also in the fourth jhana. There was one monk, he came and asked Sariputta, the right-hand disciple, Akasavaka, of the Buddha, what's the difference between a dead body and one in the fourth jhana who doesn't breathe? And then the Sariputta answered, the dead body, there's no mental activity. The sensation has ceased. The ability to sense has ceased. The metabolic activity is gone. There's no heat in the body. So, and there's no breathing. But in the fourth jhana, there also, the mental activity has ceased. There's no breathing, but there's still heat in the body. There's still metabolic activity. And the ability to sense, to perceive, has become exceedingly clear, he said. And that's also the subjective experience of it. In jhana, the ability to think, to penetrate, to perceive, to sense, to comprehend, to understand, is exceedingly clear. So the mental abilities, the mental faculties are there functioning from 200 to 500% of normal, despite the fact that both frontal lobes of the brain has been shut down. And that's, once you think that otherwise, that when you're functioning at a mentally so high level, then you should see a lot of activity in the brain. Neurophysiology, you should burn a lot of sugar and you should see a lot of electric activity and so on. But the opposite is the case. You see no activity. or less than normal activity. Far less than normal activity. And that points to this problem, this mind-brain problem that is not so easily solvable. And in the ultimate sense, Buddha say that this cannot be determined. And one should stop to try to answer these questions because they cannot be answered. If you try to answer unanswerable questions, questions that cannot be resolved, then you usually end up in a jungle of views. That they have this opinion, this or that opinion, and third opinion, a fourth opinion, and this is a good sign that nobody knows what they're talking about. But nevertheless, because there's all these views, it's not knowledge, it's not full solution to the problem. But then there's discussion about these views. And this discussion then leads away from the noble way. This leads away from the end of suffering. And so you end up out in the jungle where you cannot see the forest because of all the trees, all the wrong views, various views, this or that. The brain is the same as the thoughts and blah, blah, blah. So these questions should be put aside. So now we have 6 questions. Now we have 4 questions left. That is, a Buddha exists after death. He doesn't exist after death. He both exists and not exist after death. And he neither exists nor not exist after death. In brief, these questions are based on a Western notion of existence or non-existence, which Buddha he refused. Say, there's all these who say everything exists and it exists eternally. From one moment to the next moment, they are the same. Or that those who say it's all an illusion, that nothing exists. And in both cases, it ends with immorality, because if everything exists eternally, then it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make any difference whatever you do. And the same thing, if nothing exists, then it doesn't make any difference what you do, either good or bad, in that case. So it both ends with moral nihilism. But he said, I stay away from these extreme views and cut down the middle by paticca samuppada, dependent co-arising, which goes basically like this: says, from ignorance of the Four Noble Truth, mental constructions arise. From mental constructions do consciousness arise. From consciousness do name and form. Naming and forming arise. From name and form do the 6 senses arise. From the 6 senses do contact arise. From contact does feeling arise. From feeling does craving arise. From craving does clinging arise. From clinging, becoming arise. From becoming, birth arise, rebirth arise, of the moment and of the body and of the life, on all time scales. From this rebirth of the moment, of the body, of the being, aging, decaying, sickness, and death arise. So is the arising of this whole mass of suffering. And it gives a very dynamical point of view, very realistic point of view on this process of becoming. Instead of talking about entities that exist or that not exist, then everything is a flow, everything is a dynamic, everything is a process of becoming, rebecoming, decaying. It's never the same. Impermanence rules the waves. So there in this process you can see there is no being. So you can not say there is a being that exists. Neither can you say there is a being that doesn't exist. There is a noble way. It leads to the state of Nibbana. This process of being, of becoming actually, which is rebecoming in every moment, billions of times per second. This discrete process of rebecoming can attain in Nibbana. But there is no being or entity that is the same inside this process of becoming now while you're watching this video. Neither I am the same, nor are you the same. Then it doesn't make sense that this whatever that doesn't exist, that it exists after death, or it doesn't exist after death, or both or neither. It doesn't make sense. Because there is no entity, no I, no soul, no atta, no me, no mine, here before we attain Nibbana, or before death. So neither is there after death or after Nibbana. It doesn't make sense. So it doesn't make sense because of the anatta principle, the no self, no substance principle of Buddhism, which is assumed to be the case when you say the Tathagata exists after death. Then you thought that he existed before death also. But he doesn't exist in that way, in a conventional sense. There's a process of becoming, rebecoming. It's ever ongoing until it ends. When it ends, that's Nibbana. And therefore this, you cannot say anything whether he exists or not. It's like asking, for example, we will see how he explained that in the sutta. I'll read up loud in a moment. Let's say you have a fire of burning, and then the fire goes out, and then you ask, where did it go? Did it go east or west? Or what? South? It doesn't apply. You cannot ask where the fire went, to what location it did go, because it didn't go anywhere. It didn't go in any spatial sense of the word. And so also in the temporal sense of the word, after death, the Tathagata exists, or you exist after death, after enlightenment, or I do, or whoever do. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't apply. It's a wrongly formulated question, simply. And that's why the Buddha generally doesn't answer it. Because if you answer to those who ask the question, they expose themselves as having not understood anatta. They have not understood no self, no substance doctrine, which is also very difficult to understand. And therefore, if you give a question, if you give an answer, whatever answer you give, then they will become even more confused than they were before. So it's better not to answer, or to give a categorical answer, the categorical answer no. But even if, for example, you cannot say he exists, but you can either say he does not exist. Nor can one say, well, he both exists and does not exist. Nor can one say meaningfully, truthfully, that he both, neither does he exist, nor does he not exist. Nor does any enlightened being exist, nor not exist. After enlightenment, after death, or before, it doesn't make sense. The question is meaningless, simply. There's 3 suttas that spells it out in capital letters, and the first is Chula Malankuyavada Sutta, the shorter instructions to Malankuyava. Malankuyava was a monk under the Buddha, and he sits out in the forest one day, and then he says, Buddha, he didn't declare any of these questions. If he doesn't declare them, then I don't want to be a pupil under the Buddha anymore. And so in the evening, he raises up from his seclusion and goes to the Buddha and say to him, this appeared to me that if you cannot answer these questions to me, then I don't want to be your pupil anymore. And then the Buddha asks him, hello, foolish man. He says to him straight out, foolish man. Have I ever told you to come to live the noble life under me? And then if you did come and live, then I will declare these 10 indeterminable questions to you. No, admit that. So have you ever said to me that I will come and be a pupil only if you answer these 10 questions? No, he also admit that. Then you should not answer these questions because they are indeterminable. And so he says it's like a man to come and ask this way and to claim, demand an answer. He says it's like a man. He's hidden by an arrow, and then his family. He's lying down there. He's dying, obviously, because he has an arrow in his breast, in his heart. And then he says, don't call the surgeon because I won't have the arrow out before I know who shot the arrow and what his family name is and who made the arrow and what it's made of, which kind of wood, or the feathers that is on the arrow, where did it come from, which kind of bird, an eagle or whatever. So he asks all these questions. Then this man, he of course dies because he don't get the arrow removed. And so the Buddha says, so it's also with you. You come and ask whether this question, the cosmos is eternal or not eternal, is irrelevant. It's therefore you will not end suffering because you are, whether the cosmos is eternal or not, whether a Buddha, he exists after enlightenment or not, then there's still this suffering. There's still this impermanence. There's still this aging, sickness, and death. And so you will die, knowing even if you knew these questions, you will still die and you will still suffer. You will not be able to end suffering, which is the goal of the noble life in the first place. So there he explains to me is irrelevant. Not only can they not be answered, but if you start bustling around with them, then you miss the goal. And they are utterly irrelevant because even if you answered them, then you would still be suffering. You will still be prone to suffering, to impermanence, to aging, sickness, and death. So he says it's not the case that if you know whether the cosmos is eternal or not, whether it's finite or infinite, or whether the soul is the same as the body, then there's a noble life. That's the living of the noble life. No, that's not living the noble life. That's bustling around with wrong views. So it doesn't. It's therefore they are not only irrelevant, they are detrimental for the noble life to buzz around with. So whether you know or not, after death, a Tathagata exists, or the narcissist, there's still birth, there's still aging, there's still death, there's still sorrow, there's still lamentation, pain, despair, and distress, whose destruction I make known right here and now. So, Maliyunke Buddha, remember what is undeclared by me as undeclared, and what is declared by me as declared by me. And what is undeclared by me? The cosmos is eternal, is undeclared by me. The cosmos is not eternal, is undeclared by me. The cosmos is finite. The cosmos is infinite. The soul and body are the same. The soul and body is something different. After death, a Tathagata exists. After death, a Tathagata does not exist. After death, a Tathagata both exist and does not exist. After death, a Tathagata neither exists nor does he not exist. Is undeclared by me, Maliyunke Buddha. I have not said anything about it. And why are they undeclared by me? Because they are not connected with the goal. They are not fundamental to the holy life. They do not lead to dissolution, to dispassion, to ceasing, to calming, to direct knowledge, to self-awakening, to unbinding. That's why they are undeclared by me. They do not lead towards Nibbana. Towards Nirvana. They do not. And what is declared by me? This is suffering, is declared by me. This is the origination, the arising of suffering, is declared by me. This is the ceasing of suffering. This is declared by me. And this is the way to end all suffering. This is declared by me. And why are they declared by me? Because they are connected with the goal. They are fundamental to the holy life, to the noble life. They lead to disenchantment, to dissolution, to dispassion, to ceasing, to calming, to direct knowledge, to self-awakening, to unbinding, to Nibbana. That's why they are declared by me. That's the vulnerable truth. Huh? So, Maliyunke Buddha, remember what is by me as undeclared. And what I have declared, remember that too. That is what the Blessed One said, gratified, Maliyunke Buddha, delighted in the Blessed One's words. So you see, even though Maliyunke Buddha, he came there with the assumption that the Buddha couldn't answer these 10 questions and he will lead the noble life. He was dissatisfied. And he was called a foolish man. Still, he was able to take it, to take this pain of being called a foolish man, because he was explained in detail why these undeclared questions was undeclared. And why the things that is important for the noble life, for reaching Nibbana, the end of suffering, is declared that is the Four Noble Truth. So the Buddha, he took him away from something that is detrimental, disadvantageous, for indeterminable questions that cannot be resolved, to Four Noble Truths that can lead to Nibbana. He redirected his mind very skillfully, very skillfully. Then there's another sutta. This is, I give a link to this. This is Majjhima Nikaya number 63. It's not so long, 3 or 4 pages. I can recommend studying it. Then there is one from the Anguttara Nikaya. Just say the Majjhima Nikaya is look like this. It's brown. It's roughly 1,400 pages. It's 152 suttas. I always recommend this, studying this as the first one. It's a very, very neat work. Deep philosophical. You get an all-round knowledge about what Buddhism really is. Ancient, early Buddhism. Buddhism of the historical Buddha. The Anguttara Nikaya is this one. It is 2,000 pages. And this is a whole range of subjects. It's the numerical discourses. It goes from 1 to 11 subjects, which are very short, half a page, 1 page, which covers all kinds of subjects. For example, there are 4 ways to answer questions. That's the Book of Fours. That is, in short, to answer it categorically, analytically, counter question, or not to answer it. This is what you will find here in the Anguttara, the numerical discourses of the Buddha. It's also brown, but with a yellow rim. You can get them on the internet. Majjhima Nikaya and the numerical discourses of the Buddha. The middle-length Majjhima, the middle-length discourses of the Buddha. Start with that. So this is the avyaakata, the undeclared sutta, is number 751, the Book of Sevens. The uninstructed run-of-the-mill person doesn't discern view. He doesn't discern origination of view. He doesn't discern the cessation of views. Views here in the sense of opinions, assumptions, dogmas, speculations, not knowledge, not understanding, but views, opinions. So for him, all these views, this jungle of views, it grows. He picks up more and more views the elder he becomes. He becomes more and more disputatious and more confused about all these views. He's not free from birth, aging, death, from sorrows, lamentations, pain, distress, and despairs. He's not freed, I tell you, from suffering and stress. However, the instructed noble disciple of the noble ones discerns both what is a view, where this view comes from, where this view ends, and the way of practice, the Noble Eightfold Way, to end all these views, to end all this speculation. Thus knowing, thus seeing, he does of a nature not to declare the undeclared issues. Thus knowing, thus sees, he's not paralyzed. He doesn't quake. He doesn't shiver or shake over the undeclared questions. The Tathagata exists after death, this craving standpoint, this perception standpoint, this product of conceiving, this product of elaboration, this product of clinging. That is frustration. So he says that all these views, whether this or that, because they cannot be determined, they lead to frustration. It's like you can answer a question 80%, but you cannot know what the last 20% is. Then you cannot answer the question fully. So it's a view. It's a little bit like that, but then it's not for sure. And that since it's not for sure, some element of doubt remains. Some element of confusion, of bewilderment remains. And then this assured certainty doesn't arrive. And so you can settle the matter and put it down and leave it. It keeps buzzing around. Many people die in that state of mind, which is basically dying while ignorant. The goal of the practice is not to die while ignorant, not to die without knowing. what's up and down, what's good and bad. So this is just his speculative views. As he says, these 10 undeclared, indeterminable, unanswerable questions buzzing around with him leads away from the noble life. The last one is to another. It's a wanderer. It's not a monk. A wanderer, a sectarian from another school. There was many schools of philosophy in Buddha at Buddha's time, just as there is now. A whole plethora of psychologists and physiologists and all kinds of views. And they have, for example, also whether the universe or the cosmos is finite or infinite or eternal or not. There's many views about that in what's called science. But there's not only views. There's no proofs. This is Majjhima Nikaya again. This one is number 72 out of 152. Avyaakata Sutta, Avyaakata on fire, they are available here freely on the net, and they are translated from the Thanissaro Bhikkhu, an American monk. So this wanderer, he comes at night to the Buddha and exchanges courteous greetings with him. And after an exchange of friendly greetings and courtesies, he sat to one side. As he was sitting there, he asked the Blessed One, "How is it, Master Gautama? Does the Master Gautama hold the view the cosmos is eternal? Only this is true. Anything otherwise is worthless?" No. Then does the Master Gautama hold the view the cosmos is not eternal? Only this is true. Anything otherwise is worthless? No. Then does the Master Gautama hold the view the cosmos is finite, infinite? The soul and the body are the same. The soul and the body are something different. After death, a Buddha exists, does not exist, both exist or do not exist, or neither exists or not exists. No, he does not hold this view. How is it, Master Gautama? When Master Gautama is asked if he holds the view that the cosmos is eternal and all these questions, he says no in his case. Seeing what drawback then is Master Gautama, thus entirely dissociated from each of these positions? Vajja, the Buddha then answered, the position that the cosmos is eternal is a thicket of views, a wilderness of views, a contortion of views, a writhing of views, a fetter of views. It is accompanied by suffering, distress, despair, and fever. And it does not lead to disenchantment, to disillusion, to dispassion, to ceasing, to calm, to direct knowledge and understanding, to full awakening, to unbinding, to Nibbana. All these views, the position of the cosmos is eternal and so on, they does not lead to that Nibbana, to that cessation, to that calming. Then Vajjakota asks, does Master Gautama have any position at all? A position, a view, a standpoint. Vajja is something that a Tathagata has done away with. What a Tathagata sees is this, such is form. Such is the origination of form. Such is the disappearance of form. Such is feeling. Such is the origination of feeling. And such is the disappearing of feeling. Such is perception. Such is mental fabrication or construction or formation. And such is consciousness. Such is origination and such is disappearance. So he speaks about the 5 clusters of clinging there. Form, feeling, perception, mental construction, and consciousness, which is what a being constitutes a being in Buddhist definition. Because of this, I say at Tathagata, with the ending, fading away, cessation, and renunciation and relinquishment of all construings, all excogitations, all I-making, all mind-making and obsessions with conceit, is through lack of clinging released. All excogitations, all I-making, all mind-making, and all obsessions with conceit is through lack of clinging to that one is released. But Master Gautama, the monk whose mind is thus released, where does he reappear? Reappear, Vajja, doesn't apply. In that case, Master Gautama, he does not reappear. Does not reappear, Vajja, does not apply. But does he both reappear and not reappear? Doesn't apply, Vajja. But neither does he appear, nor does he not reappear. Doesn't apply, Vajja. How is it, Master Gautama, when Master Gautama is asked if the monk reappears, does not reappear, or both reappear and not reappear? He says, doesn't apply in each case. At this point, Master Gautama, I'm befuddled. At this point, I'm confused. The modicum of clarity coming from me, from your earlier conversation, is now obscured. Of course you're befuddled, Vajja. Of course you're confused. Deep, Vajja, is this phenomenon. Hard to see, hard to realize. Tranquil, refined, beyond the scope of conjecture. Subtle, to be experienced by the wise. For those with other views, other practices, other satisfactions, other aims, other teachers, it is difficult to know. That being the case, I will now put some questions to you. Answer as you see fit. What do you think, Vajja? It's a fire. If a fire is burning in front of you, would you know of that this fire is burning in front of me? So now you see the four ways of. He starts to ask, before he asks the questions categorically. No, it doesn't apply. And analytically, with the 5 khandhas, the 5 clusters of clinging. Now he poses last shot, a counter question to Vajja to make him understand. If there's a fire in front of you, do you know that there's a fire in front of you? Yes, Vajjakocha. And suppose someone were to ask you, Vajja, this fire that's burning in front of you, depending on what is it burning? Thus ask, how would you reply? I will reply that this fire is burning in front of me, depending on grass and timber as its sustenance. If the fire in front of you were to go out, would you know that this fire in front of you has gone out? Yes, I would know that this has gone out. And suppose someone were to ask you, this fire has gone out in front of you, and in which direction from here has it gone? East or west or north or south? Thus ask, how would you reply? That doesn't apply, Master Gautama. Any fire dependent on sustenance, on grass or timber, being unnourished from having consumed all this timber and firewood and grass, and not being offered any other, is classified simply as gone out. Even so, Vajja, any physical form by which one describing the Tathagata would describe him, that the Buddha has abandoned. He's destroyed the root, made it like a palmyra stump, deprived it of conditions from development, not destined for any future realizing. Freed from the classification of form, Vajja, the Buddha is deep, boundless, hard to fathom, like the sea. Reappears doesn't apply. Does not reappear, doesn't apply. Both reappear and does not reappear, does not apply. Neither reappear, does not reappear, doesn't apply either. Any feeling, any perception, any mental construction, and any consciousness by which one will describe the Buddha as a Buddha, that consciousness the Buddha has abandoned, and he has destroyed its root, made it like a palmyra stump. It's a palm that cannot grow if you cut it down. Deprived it of the condition of realizing. So it cannot develop. It's not destined for any future realizing. So freed from classification of consciousness, Vajja, is Buddha, deep, boundless, hard to fathom, just like the ocean. Reappear doesn't apply. Does not reappear doesn't apply. Both does and does not reappear doesn't apply. Neither reappear nor does not reappear doesn't apply. When this was said, the Wanderer Vajjagota said to the Blessed One, Master Gautama, It is as if there were a great tree not far from a village or town. From impermanence, its branches and leaves would fall off and wear away. Its bark would also fall off. Its sapwood would also fall off. So on that later occasion, divested of branches, leaves, and without bark and sapwood, it would stand as pure hardwood. In the same way, Master Gautama, is the Master Gautama's words, divested of branches, leaves, bark, and sapwood, and stand as pure hardwood. Magnificent, Master Gautama, magnificent, just as if we were to place upright what was overturned, to reveal what was hidden, to show the way to one who was lost, or to carry a lamp into the dark, so that those with eyes could come to see forms. In exactly the same way as Master Gautama, through many lives of reasoning, in many ways made the Dhamma clear. I go to Master Gautama for refuge. I go to the Dhamma and to the Sangha of monks. May Master Gautama remember me as a lay follower who has gone to him for refuge from this day on for life, lifelong. So the Buddha, he got himself a new disciple there by pointing it out in many ways, both by categorical answers and by counter-questioning. But that is a failure to say that he refused to answer. As you see, he answered in great detail, actually. Why is senseless to ask these 10 questions, and why it's not connected with the noble life, and why it does not lead to Nibbana, and why it leads out in an endless forest and thicket, a contortion of views that is unresolvable. I think this is 52 minutes and 52 seconds. I think we take just one more question, but then I think it's enough for today, because otherwise we'll go over time. This is a question. It goes like this. What constitutes good intention? Yeah, a good intention is any intention to think, speak, or act motivated by friendliness, kindness, goodwill, that is absence of hate, which is a root evil. And also when motivated by generosity, sharing, and rejoicing, which is absence of greed. It's the opposite of greed, which also is a root evil. There's 3 root evil: hate, greed, and ignorance. And also any intention that is motivated by assured knowledge, full understanding of the Four Noble Truths, which is absence of ignorance, which is also a root evil. So bad intention, wrong intention, is miccha sankappa, is any intention to think, speak, or act when motivated by hate, greed, or ignorance, or diluted derivatives thereof, such as miserliness, envy, jealousy, anger, irritation, stubbornness, pride, arrogance, self-deception, conceit, horniness, lust, desire, attraction, aversion, opposition, doubt, confusion, and hesitation, just to mention a few. So in short, any intention motivated by absence of ill will, that is absence of hate, that is friendliness, absence of greed, that is generosity, giving, sharing, and absence of ignorance, knowing the Four Noble Truths. This is right motivation. This is good motivation. This is advantageous motivation, which leads to a pleasurable result in the future. The next question here is also from question 53. Is a B-word question. Is when one abstains from doing evil, does it matter whether one abstains from doing evil out of awareness of this disadvantageous state, such as envy or fear or pride? That one is aware of that in that very moment, and that therefore one doesn't do evil through any of the 3 doors of the mind: thinking evil, or speaking evil, or acting evil. One doesn't do that. Or does it matter whether it's an analysis from right and wrong, and thereby seeing the painful consequences of this evil action, down the road from the karmic ego. No, it does not matter. It does not matter, actually. What matters, karmically speaking, is that one doesn't perform the action. One sees it in advance, whether it's one sees it by analysis, by analytical knowledge, or one sees it by awareness, just by seeing, now I'm angry, now I'm greedy, now I'm ignorant, or I'm confused, and thereby stop acting and reflect upon it instead, and then comes out of this disadvantageous mental state before acting. Then it's just this avoidance of evil action, of evil karma, that is life-saving and preventive of this bad karma coming down the road, the echo of pain. So it's an avoidance of all wrong, evil, intentional action that matters, and it's karmically effective. Why and how one avoids this evil action, this wrong action, it doesn't matter so much. However, one can say on the long run, habitually, one will tend to avoid evil action better if one is both aware and able to produce an analytical insight to why, for example, this greed arised and how it ceases, and what was the cause of this irritation to arise, or what was the cause of this non-knowledge to arise, this uncertainty, this confusion in that very moment. If one can see that, then it will be prevent that it re-arises again in the future. So there it has some matter, but in the single instant of action, in each and every moment, then there is avoidance of evil action, of evil, disadvantageous thinking, speaking, or acting when motivated by either any kind of greed, any kind of aversion, hate, irritation, or any kind of ignorance, confusion, doubt, uncertainty. If one avoids that, stops up and reflects before taking action, then this of course demands that one can control the emotional part. Usually one is pushed into by one's emotion. If unaware of this emotion, then the automatic emotional response will be, if there's a pleasure connected with it, then one will form an intention based on lust and greed, which will have a detrimental, painful karmic consequence. If the momentary feeling is painful, then one will automatically, if unaware, not if aware, but if unaware, then one will form some kind of motivation, some kind of intention based on aversion, of hate, of opposition, of pushing the object that caused the feeling away. And if it's ignorance, if it's neutral feeling that is dominating the present moment, and one is kind of like overtaken by this neutral feeling and not aware of it, then it's subjectively felt as boredom. Then one will push the object away, neglect it, and then ignorance will arise because one doesn't come to know the object when neglecting it. So it demands that one is aware of the emotions and being able to control them. Some in modern psychology calls it emotional intelligence. Whatever you call it, we'll call it awareness or mindfulness. I think awareness is a better word. This was 59 minutes. I think we skip question 54 to next time, because now we spend a lot of time on the undeterminable questions. So this we take next time. I just make a note here. And then I will say thank you for your attention. Remember to click subscribe down there. Also remember to go to my website, and there you can also subscribe to the daily newsletter that comes from the Google group Buddha Direct, and my website is whatbuddhasaid.net. Namo Tasso Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Worthy, honorable, and perfectly self-enlightened was the blessed Buddha. May you and all beings become exceedingly happy thereby. Thank you, and have a nice day.
You heard Bhikkhu Samahita from the Cypress Hermitage on the Knuckles Mountain, Pamparella, Central Hill Country, Sri Lanka. Please subscribe to the Google group Buddha Direct